Hey everybody, welcome to the Growing with Fishes podcast. I'm Steve,
Marty.
and we try to do this podcast every week. Last week we were off. I was moving across a couple of states, so I'm out in California now, out here in Humboldt County. So we we try to hold on. I'm having an echo. Sorry about that. Okay, so we try to do this podcast every week and cover different aquaponic cannabis growing topics, aquaponic topics, cannabis topics, legalization topics, just different things around that kind of world. If you grow cannabis or aquaponically, either veggies or cannabis, we try to touch on a bunch of different topics and some movement topics as far as legalization. And growing things. We always encourage people to send in questions. Feel free to leave them in the comments of this, or email us at potentponics@gmail.com, and we'll answer them in the podcast, which we have a bunch for later in the episode. Um, let's see, we have a whole bunch of stuff going on. I just moved out to Humboldt County. We'll be doing a bunch of different projects out here. I'll have some video and a bunch of fun stuff to show you guys later. I can't talk much about what we're doing out here yet, other than we got some cool things to talk about. Do you want to tell us what you've been up to lately, Marty? And I know you have been doing lots of cool things with your grow. You had lots of new pictures to post and stuff.
Yeah, I always like when the sort of the early to mid flower stages is always fun because you get such a rapid change. The last couple weeks is just hardening up and stuff like that. So it's always a fun time. So I think I just started 4 weeks, something like that. Probably about 4.5 weeks right now. I don't remember the day specifically I flipped, but yeah. So it's been looking pretty good. That's on the indoor. The outdoor, obviously, still been going really well, and just seeing some really good growth on both of them. So that's been good. Yeah, pretty much. Oh, caterpillars outside. That's been like the big thing this year. There's way more of them than there have been in previous years. So got out the Monterey BT spraying, hosed everybody down, and it's important to, especially in veg time when you're still creating a lot of new plant material, is to make sure that you spray, fairly often, because once you get new plant leaves that have grown that have not been treated, then they can just start laying them again. And I've actually not had any of them on the cannabis plants so far. They've been on all of my companion plants. So they've been on all of my mustard greens and all of my kale, and they just tore my kale to shit, actually. Like, they demolished it in a matter of like a day and a half. And so put some spray on them, knocked them down. Everything was fine. I noticed a couple of more, maybe like a day or two ago. So I sprayed them again last night. And yeah, stuff works good. You can see them the next day, even the ones you don't pick off. And I usually pick them off. I cut them in half and throw them in the fish tank, so that the fish can eat them. So, but even still, you'll come back. I come back later and find them just laying on the grow bed, because essentially it just poisons them, and or is toxic to them, I guess is probably the better term for it. So yeah, this year has been way more than anything else. So that's been the main thing that I've dealt with. Other than that, it's been pretty much maintenance stuff for me. And I have 6 plants in the ground and 4 plants in the aquaponics system. So just keeping those chugging right along. It's been going good. I have a pretty good comparison. The Starfighter, I have both in aquaponics and in the ground. 2 of them that were basically the same size when I transplanted both of them. And they're in the same backyard. And the aquaponics one is just killing it in terms of growth. I mean, not that the other one isn't doing well, it's still growing quite well. It's not that much smaller, but it's noticeably, I would say probably like overall 20% smaller. So that's been nice to see sort of the comparison between the two, and they're clones of exactly the same mother. So that's always a fun comparison to do that stuff. And yeah, looks good. I don't know, I just threw up a picture in the Aquaponic Cannabis Growers group if anybody wants to check that out. That's the Starfighter in the indoor that I have running outdoor also. So pretty high on that stuff. It's good stuff. Have you worked with Starfighter or any of those OGs?
I haven't worked with that one, no.
It's pretty fun. But yeah, that's been about it for me.
Have you posted any like side-by-side pictures at all, or is that what you just posted?
I haven't
As far
posted
as the
any
two
of
different plants.
in the soil ones. I don't think in any of the aquaponics groups, just because it's not aquaponics. But I'll post a comparison because
Yeah,
seems valid.
post the soil next to the AP, and let's do that like once a week or something. That'd be really cool to follow up and see.
Yeah, I think I have pictures. I should be able to just post them, so that should be good. And
It'd be great for people to see.
I don't take videos those for my channel. I guess maybe I could do that. Oh, I have a video comparison.
Yeah,
That'd be kind of cool.
that would be awesome.
A little walkthrough.
That'd be great.
But yeah, it definitely is going quite well. Plants look great. I think they were still growing about 4 inches a day. Or the biggest one was growing about 4 inches a day. It seems to pretty much stay right in there, unless it gets really hot to the point where it starts like drooping and stuff. Then slows down a little bit. But it was really mild, like maybe like low 80s. I got up to the high 80s a couple of times, but had some really nice days for the last probably like week and a half or so. So saw some really good growth. So it's probably, I'm still estimating it's probably going to get about 10 feet tall by the time it's done vegging and everything. So should be fun.
So you were talking about caterpillars. So what did you said you used the BT to kill the caterpillars? Have you tried other things, or?
No, I've always had good success with Monterey BT. I really just haven't had to try anything else because you go out, you spray it, and it is just a it's like a spinosad, or what do they call those?
Yep.
I forget isn't there like a
natural base?
Yeah, seems like they had a specific name for that family or something like that, but I don't know. Anyway, so it's a natural based, it's almost like a beneficial bacteria, but not. It's like it's parasitic to the caterpillar, I guess is the best way to describe it. But anyway, so it's called Monterey BT, and you can find it in most even co-ops and stuff like that, gardening shops. Seem to have it, at least over here. Especially grow shops have it for sure. Most of them.
It's a natural. It's based on Bacillus thuringiensis, subspecies Kurstaki. Yeah. So it's just a microbe.
Yeah, it works extremely well. Like I said, you can even come out the next day after you spray it, and if there's any of them that you missed, you'll basically they'll you'll see them either dead or turning brown, half dead, laying on top of your media beds, just sort of dead, I guess.
Yeah, the nice thing about that too is if it gets into your system, you're not going to have any problems, or if the caterpillars fall off and the fish eat them, there's not going to be any issue.
Yeah, it's not covered in any sort of like pesticide or anything like that.
There's no chemical agent. Yeah.
And growers have been using that, like especially the more organic growers have been using that for a while. That was so I've never actually tried anything else for caterpillars. That's just sort of what I've always used. How about you? How do you deal with them?
Alcohol is really good. You could take like a high proof alcohol, and mix it with some water and spray it on them. And that works really well as like a direct application. Um, the other one that works really well is powdered milk or whole milk, sprayed and misted onto the plants, or anything, 30% whole milk to 70% water is fine too. Spraying that onto your plants, and the lactose kills them, which is something I used for many, many, many years before I used the BT. But both of them work very well.
Cool.
But if you're looking for a direct application, like you see some, you want to kill them now, alcohol is the way to go. They absorb it through their skin and they die from alcohol poisoning pretty quick.
Awesome. If I ever can find BT, or I'll definitely try that.
Yeah, it's definitely a good one. Um, yeah. So I thought this week, for I guess we'll do some news topics and then we'll go to the AP. So I thought this week we could do an AP 101, which would be kind of cool. We'll talk about system stuff and some different components and different little advice on that and different things and different fish and inverts, and try to cover a little bit of a little bit on each of those topics, since we get in a lot of kind of 101 questions. We can kind of refer to this episode on some stuff. But there was a particularly ridiculous news article this week that I wanted to bring up just because it was kind of epically insane.
Right.
So, the town of Hugo in Colorado had its water supply like shut off, and they put out a warning saying to avoid drinking Hugo town water because the I don't know, the local water department did a test and it came back positive for THC, like that the town's water. So they put out this public notice saying that there is THC in the water and people shouldn't drink it. Meanwhile, dispensaries are not allowed in this town. Neither is production. So how that could have happened, who knows? But the town only has 800 people. Um, but yeah, so they made a huge stink over it, and then they retested the water and they found there was nothing in it. Um, but it was just completely ridiculous. Cannabinoids aren't water soluble anyway, so I don't know. I just thought it was completely ridiculous. It was all over the news this week, and if you didn't see it and you follow cannabis news, you must live under a rock. But I wanted to bring it up because it was just too insane and too funny, and too just like, I think the police or the water department's just smoking too much weed.
Yeah, I don't. When I first read it, I was like, that does not
Thought it
sound
was
like
like the
business
Onion
at
or
all. Like,
something, right?
yeah, you knew, you know, I think a lot of people knew as soon as they read it that something was not right, and yeah, so it's basically just scare tactics, like it's just I don't know, it's the same reefer badness sort of bullshit that they've been pulling for decades. So I mean, it doesn't surprise me, but at the same time, it saddens me, I guess. Like, I don't know. Even on some level, like, can you come up with something new? Like, even if you want to still continue to be, an opponent to it, at least, um, make an attempt to find something credible. I mean, obviously, that's going to get, busted right away. Like, it's not that's not ever going to get any traction or go anywhere. So I don't even know why. Like, if you were opposed to marijuana in general, how you would think that it would even like further your goal. So I don't know. The whole thing just seems stupid to me, I guess.
So there was another really interesting article this week. For those of you out there who don't know, the police like to use a particular for people that are operating less than legally. Um, as we like to say, less than legally. Um, They use this thing called a stingray, which spoofs as a radio cell phone tower to grab your information. Blah 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 blah. Well, and steal all your things. They can use it to tell where you are at a given time and prove that you're dealing with such and such, and I don't know, use it in court evidence. Anyways, a federal judge in New York and Manhattan ruled for the first time that evidence obtained via using this without a warrant was ruled illegal and violating the defendant's rights, and threw it out and ruled that this is not. They can't. Police have to get a warrant from now on if they're going to start using stingrays for a particular target, which totally changes what they've been doing at the moment, which is just blanketly fishing. It's a really big thing for personal rights and cell phone rights and all this other stuff as far as limiting, random surveillance. They actually have to get an actual warrant for a specific person in a specific town, and put it in front of a judge and get a thing. Not that that's particularly hard, but at least they have to go and do it. It's the legal way, the way they should have to do it. So,
Yeah, it's sort of the bare
so that
minimum.
was a really, really big, yeah, bare minimum. So that was a really big court victory for civil rights and the cannabis, especially involving a lot of cannabis people. Now they're going back and looking at thousands of cases in New York and other states that might be overturned because of the ruling, because it was a federal court judge, and they can use that as precedents to overturn a whole bunch of people that have been, I forget back to how far, but a whole bunch. It's going to end up being a really, really, really bigger deal in the long run.
And imagine that lawyers get paid again.
Right.
Even
So
to go back and
over
overturn
in
cases, they'll still get paid again. DAs and all that. I mean, it just, I don't know. Like, I know it needs to be done. I'm not saying, I'm not complaining about that, but I just think it's funny. Like, how many times like are talking through a scenario like that, and then you're like, oh, yep, there's where lawyers get paid again for the same. They're getting paid again to undo what they did before. Like lawyers and accountants, it seems like they always get paid to do that. Like they want to get paid to fix their mistakes. I don't know. Just bothers me, I guess, that they get to do that. I don't know.
Sure. So, University of Tel Aviv has been doing some longer term studies since 2003, involving the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, and cannabis, CBD, THC, other cannabinoids, and preventing traumatic brain injury, and then also helping people recover from traumatic brain injury post, and reducing symptoms and all post, once they have them. They found a huge increase. They said they found patients, 88.5% of the patients said that they had, improved symptoms from the study. Um, and they found that it had a huge, huge impact in preventing longer term damage and longer term symptoms, especially the first, um, after 6 months of the injury. So it was a pretty interesting article.
Yeah, if
If you
you
guys
could
are
post
interested in
that,
more on that,
that'd be great.
yeah, yeah, I'll post all this stuff in the link there in the comment section of the video in the end. Um, the next link I had here for the week, a news article, was Alabama parents. So they just got access to, in Alabama for CBD oil just recently, and a whole bunch of parents are reporting a huge, huge impact. They just did a huge bunch of interviews with a bunch of different parents saying, how much fewer seizures these children are having, and um, a whole bunch of different stuff. The one kid's only using 3% THC, or no, the law. I'm sorry, Lenny's law allows CBD oil with THC levels up to 3%. Um, so they allow up to THC levels of 3%. So it's not the greatest because they still can't get their good one-to-one ratios, but you know, it's better than nothing. It helps out a lot of these kids with seizure disorders and other things. So we'll post that. That was a pretty good article. And then Italy and Germany are looking to expand their access, which I won't go into too much. And then one thing I wanted to talk about, because I haven't really heard about anyone else in the other cannabis radio shows or podcasts or anything else bringing this up, but Atlanta has got this bill they're waiting on for their cannabis patients, and um, they're waiting on the federal agency's decision on how to classify cannabis before their local government acts. If they don't bump it down, their governor's refusing to sign it or something like that. So, um, you know, I'll post the article and y'all can read it for yourself. But it was just kind of crappy for them that they're still waiting on this, and that you know it depends on what the DEA does, and who knows what they'll do. So nobody still knows. Don't believe any of that crap that they're going to change it on the first or whatever. There's a strong indication they're going to announce it in August or September, but nobody knows for sure yet. Beyond that, I know I posted a thing about it, um, but that was just a rumor. Nobody really knows for sure yet. So.
Right. Yeah, I think that the the one that's particularly interesting to me is the one about the traumatic brain injury that study you were talking about. I was just on a podcast earlier this week with a radio show with a group of veterans from Weed for Warriors in Illinois, and definitely want to post that for them and get that information over to them, because they're doing a great job working with our veterans to help get them off of pharmaceutical medications, and are having a lot of success with it. So definitely want to give them some support and anytime I can. So I'll link that over to them, and I'll post their information about their show and their group as well when we upload the video here into my channel. And I'll send it over there for you guys too, Steve. But I had a great time on their podcast. We spent a while just basically talking about the same kind of stuff that we do, and the stuff that they're dealing with in Illinois. Hopefully, give them some advice as they move forward with their medical program and getting that stuff set up, and trying to keep them involved and informed. And I basically told them, know who your council members are. Like, that's the one thing I could go back in time and do, is that know who my council people were before any of that stuff went through, because I could have voted differently, or voted at all for local council for that matter. I don't even know if I did, to be honest. So I didn't really know anything about him, and if I did vote for him, it wasn't a very informed vote. So yeah, I think that was probably the biggest thing in how they'll interpret laws and still try to use them against you. Even if you're like Oregon, we wrote right into Measure 91 that we didn't want them to have any jurisdiction over medical at all whatsoever, and no local city or county was supposed to be able to overwrite any of that stuff, anything medical, as a result of Measure 91. So that's been obviously the big challenge we're dealing with. And we have a hearing coming up in Jackson County. I think it's either Monday or Tuesday. Let me look. It's the 26th, so Tuesday at 9, I think, at the courthouse. So if anybody's listening, Jackson County wants to stop by and give their 2 cents, we're going to try and fill up the council room with growers again for probably, I don't know, the 5th or 6th time. It should be stuffed full of people that want them to stop doing what they're doing. So hopefully they'll get the point at some point. So yeah, that's basically where I'm at in Jackson here. And I think that it's important to know who your local council is. They're going to be the ones that interpret all of this stuff and implement any bans or limitations or regulations that could affect medical. So if you're in a state that already has medical and going recreational, be aware of it. If you're a state that has medical, course, trying to get medical, you still need to be aware of it because eventually those regulations are all going to filter through city and county councils. So know who they are, vote for them, make sure they're not assholes. What you doing over there, Steve? I see you clicking around.
Yeah, I was just somebody was asking a question here about it. It says I was replying to him. Hey, great podcast. Last podcast, you forgot to answer my question about last podcast. I was wondering with a 55-gallon barrel for a chop system, flip system, would I need a swirl filter, biofilter, and sump tank for the setup? I live in an apartment so tight on space. I want to add a vertical tower to utilize the space I do have. So, for this one, you don't really need a swirl filter, especially for something that small. You know, you don't really need to go crazy. You're not going to have that many fish. You're only going to have enough fish to supply enough nitrogen for that, which you're not going to be supplying that much waste to that. You know, nothing that you're going to be able to not handle with the plants and all. So, and then as far as the tower goes, you know, that'd be great for doing you know, clones and stuff like that. But, you know, unless you're going to do a really quick turn, might not be the best to flower out in. Um, so, um, I guess that
If
would
you're
be
just
my
doing
advice on that.
veggies, for instance, if you're just growing food, obviously, but anything that I think you'd want, and I guess my thing with towers is that, they can be leaky for sure. So if you're gonna have it in an apartment, like just make sure you have a really good sealed setup. A lot of the um, the DIY sort of PVC tower setups that you see, I don't, a lot of times those can be really, really leaky. Been over to one of my buddies' places where he tried doing it, and basically, I think they used the heat gun, where you heat up the side and push them in. There's a number of DIY videos on how to set them up, but they had the issue where pretty much anywhere the when you had them on opposite sides. So if you had the PVC power coming on like this, and you had one in like this and one like that, if you get those at basically the wrong angle, you'll have water flowing right out of the other one. So it can be a pain in the butt to keep them from leaking all over the place in an apartment. It might be difficult to have a tower. So definitely be aware of that when you're making it, and designing it, that you don't want to have water splashing everywhere, because first of all, it'll be a mess. And second of all, you'll probably have a relatively small tank and a small system inside. So you just run out of water relatively quickly. You'll be adding water to it every day to keep it up and going. So that's my advice on vertical towers in small spaces. They're great, but just make sure you do something to account for spillage.
Indeed.
And I guess you pretty much, I agree with you on the filter. I mean, I would keep fish density pretty low, just throw a couple fish in there. And yeah, I would just have a media bed of some sort. So I'd have like a tower down to a media bed, and just use the media bed for the main filter, and have some red worms in there. And I would call that my filter.
Yeah. So, if anyone has any questions, feel free to write it in. Um, we had could you add Epsom salt to the ferments instead of sugar? You could definitely add it to it, but it wouldn't be instead of sugar. The sugar feeds your microbes, and the Epsom salt's just going to provide magnesium and sulfur, which does benefit the microbes, but in a completely different way than sugars do. So it wouldn't be in any way a replacement. Um, So, do you believe it would leach desired nutrients out of the fruits and leaves? No, it wouldn't leach anything. It would just add magnesium and sulfur. Maybe it was a stoner idea. And the other one is, can I use 85% food grade phosphoric acid? Yes, you can use it, but that's a little hardcore. I mean, I would use that if I had a really large system. I don't know if I would use it on a small system. It's just it's pretty hardcore. I know most people use 12% or 20% or something like that. It can just be pretty hardcore. And if you happen to spill it on yourself, man, you're gonna feel the 85% for sure. You're not gonna feel the 12%. So, I used to not really even bother wearing gloves
Yeah,
much
I'd
with
probably
cold
just
stuff.
dilute it first, like if I
Yeah,
had
I would
to.
just dilute it and use it to
Yeah.
make my own big batches. Is what I would do. Yeah.
But I don't. I mean, I use the lower percentage ones also. So, but you could. But if I did, I think I would dilute it as opposed to try and use it at that high a concentration because you spill a little bit too much or something happened. Yeah. On a small system, you might be wanting to put it in with an eyedropper. So it's kind of like uh, it's not really anything different. It's just at a higher concentration. So it would be fine to use, but be careful with it, I guess, would be my opinion.
What else we got here? Yeah, that's all I have for that part. Um, so what is the current status on your like legality situation with your township and your lawsuit situation? Do you have any kind of follow
Yeah,
up
so
with all that?
I got an extension on my violation warning of violation, I think it was called. So basically, I won't get fined at the moment. And my first fine is $600, and my second fine is $10,000, I think, something like that. So they can't even give me my first fine right now because I've been in contact with them and got an extension. And there's a hearing about land use, and that's what basically all this stuff about it for me growing outside is all based on my zoning um, and what they determine farm use. So yeah, I'm gonna apply for a permit hopefully, and I'll get all that extended out. But on Tuesday morning, we're gonna have the farm use meeting where they're supposed to talk about all this stuff. So I should have some more information out of that too. But it looks like I'll have to provide documentation like pictures, and I have to have notarized statements from my patients from last year, and like a description of the grow and a list of people that trimmed and like this whole it's like a 2-page like report that I have to do to prove that my grow existed last year so that I can be grandfathered in. And even still, that still cost me $1,500. Like after I put all that stuff together and I apply for it, it still cost me $1,500 just to basically be grandfathered in. If I don't get the permit, then I'm not grandfathered in. So it basically, I don't know, it's extortion. But at this point, hopefully what will happen is that it will get overturned and we'll be able to get these regulations changed or at least amended greatly. So that's kind of the boat I'm in right now. And right, I still have all my plants in the ground. Another couple weeks, we'll figure it out. I'm going to be at the meeting on Tuesday, so maybe if we do a podcast on Thursday or so, I'll have some more information on what they had to say there, and then usually the next day we go over it with the lawyer and kind of get their interpretation of what they had to say, and I'll have some more information then. But that's where it sits right now. And everybody in Jackson County, if you're on urban residential land, basically anybody can call up and complain. Or I've heard also that some county enforcers have just been out driving around looking at grows. So that's been a thing. Oh, here's another news story for you. I don't know if you know about this or not, but in Oregon, the one of the, I don't remember if it was the OHA or it might have been the OLCC, I think I'll have to look it up again, but they exposed a whole bunch of growers' email addresses, um, which is essentially private information. Some people are trying to have it interpreted as a HIPAA violation and have them sued. But yeah, there was a whole list of like, I can't even remember, a couple thousand, I think, of growers that had their email released without their knowledge. So some people think that other information like our addresses get passed over to people who work at the county so that they can just drive over and write up a violation, and then, bam, that's another $1,500 for the county, or they get to shut down a grower. So for them, it's sort of a win-win. So
very awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty much mob. That's what it is. I've decided they just come in like the mob, and they're like, "Hey, it'd be a shame if somebody came in here and ripped your plants out of the ground. If you give me $1,500, that won't happen." And that's basically what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So, you want to start with this AP 101? I thought this would be really fun for both of us to go over, and we've had a lot of different kind of requests on this.
Yeah,
so that'd be fun. Unless you want to just do like a equipment first, or just do like the live, like the fish and inverts now, and do the other one in a different episode, or we can just go through it, or.
Well, I think probably where I would want to start out is like defining, what it is. They actually asked me this on the podcast when I was on it before, which is, how do you define aquaponics? Like, what is it? Sort of in the general terms. And so, I think that you have the basics, right? You have to have, obviously, fish or some sort of animal that you're using inside of a closed loop system, so not decoupled, where you're just keeping a fish tank with a biofilter and then feeding the water to plants in the ground. So that's pretty much it. I think you're raising an aquatic animal in a closed loop system and growing plants with that system is pretty much what I would call like the bare bones of it. And then you can take it in sort of whatever way you want from there. Whether you want a huge system or a small one, or barrels or towers, or swirl filters, radial filters. There's you can be as complicated or as simple as you want it to be, right? Dual root zone, same thing. So that's how I would define it, those basic principles of aquatic life and growing plants with their waste products. Do you have anything else you can think of besides that?
No, I think that's good. So I had for the AP 101, I figured we could start off. Sorry, I just had a family thing come up, and I spaced out. What was the decision on that? Sorry, just being a stoner. As far as talking topic wise, we're doing living things.
Oh, you were doing
equipment.
I was saying that we were defining the aquaponics, sort of what it is, and we were starting on the aquaponics 101. So I would say that aquatic animals in a closed loop system where you use the byproducts to grow plants. Like, that's pretty much the nuts and bolts of it, and how we go from there. Elaborate, not whatever. Mm-hmm. Do you have anything else you can think of for basic rules?
So yeah, I guess we could touch on some basic stuff as far as the living things on that note. So some stuff you definitely want to don't do is don't put duckweed into your system and let it breed out of control. It'll clog everything. be mindful of that whenever you're adding things to your system, especially if you're gonna add water hyacinth or water lettuce and that kind of stuff. It'll creep in. Or aquatic plants from the pet store. Yeah, it might seem like a good idea to try and grow that in your AP system, but man, if you add that duckweed, it's gonna clog your stuff, clog your overflows, and that'll be the end of it. Sorry for spacing out there for a minute. Just had a weird family email I had to take care of for a minute. Threw me off track mentally.
Oh,
Um,
that's all right. No problem.
Other things you should definitely consider not putting in your system: freshwater mussels. Freshwater mussels have a parasitic life stage, um, and they can cause all kinds of stuff, um, like not necessarily death, but it can definitely injure your fish quite a bit, and you don't want to do that. The other thing is that if they spawn in the system, um, and they can have little babies that clog up your plumbing and clog up your pipes and everything else. Um, so that can definitely cause a whole bunch of problems. Those are the ones I would say you're definitely, absolutely do not put them in your system under any circumstance because they just will cause nightmares. Also avoid snails
Yeah, I
because
was just
baby
getting ready to
snails
say
also send
snails.
these in.
The other one.
Yeah, avoid them. Unless maybe the big apple snails because you can see the big foam eggs and they're easy enough to separate out and hatch separately or get rid of or whatever. Um, but those are restricted in many states as well. So those are stuff I would say definitely avoid um, as far as that goes in an AP system. But aside from that, yeah, you can use any kind of other freshwater crabs, prawns, shrimp, fish. Some people even do turtles, and frogs and stuff. Yeah, technically you can have a very, very small remote chance of introducing salmonella, but the you know, not very likely to do it.
I think if you're
Um,
just getting started, then I would just grab goldfish, like just straight up cheap goldfish from the pet store, and sort of get everything figured out from there, and then switch to a fish that you want to raise, and then it'll just sort of narrow that scope down of things that you have to learn if you already know how to keep the aquaponics system with goldfish, then you pretty much just have to learn the nuances of switching breed of fish when you switch to catfish or bluegill or tilapia or whatever it is. You just kind of have to get to know the breed as opposed to try and learn everything at once. So goldfish are cheap. They definitely work. They eat a lot. They produce plenty of fertilizer, and if you kill a bunch of them, you don't really have to worry about it. So that's my advice for the beginners out there, is to just start there, and then when you're ready to swap over, you feel confident enough, then go for it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, so other since we're on the topic of living things, we'll just keep going with that a little bit. Stuff I wanted to really tell people about that are really, really awesome to raise in your systems, especially if you have the rafts, especially. So things I really like for rafts that you don't normally get to hear about in aquaponics are vampire crabs, which are a type of freshwater fiddler. They love to go around and eat your damaged leaves, your dead, dying lower leaves from lettuce and the lower damaged leaves that are falling down and kind of starting to rot and stuff like that. They love to eat all that, so they trim them off. They're like little gardeners, but in general, don't really have damage much stuff. Um, and they The other one I like to use, and they do really great job of keeping things clean. They love to eat insects, so they prefer protein. So if there is an insect or something that's there that they're capable of eating, they'll go over and eat it. So they're, almost like a little active defense force for your garden and for your rafts. They love, just leave a couple holes open so that they can just climb in and out of the water. But they are really good. We use them a bunch over in the lab of an aquaponics source when I used to work over there, and a couple of the beds, and that was really fun. I use them a ton, and whenever I keep reptiles and amphibians, because they just do a great job of keeping the tanks clean. Um, and Yeah, it works really well. Um, the other ones, oh, the other freshwater crab I wanted to mention is there's one called the Thai micro crab, which is very desirable in the pet trade, and they do extremely well in the raft beds. They eat algae and detritus and, just dead, dying plant matter. They don't eat live plant matter at all, and they're extremely gentle, easy to breed. Just throw them in your rafts, let them do their thing. Just be careful, you give your roots a real good shake. You don't pull them out when you harvest your plants from the raft beds if you're doing any kind of raft stuff, or even in your sumps and things like that. But they're really good. Just be mindful that your inverts are a little more sensitive, so don't. They're good for real low nutrient systems, but don't put them in like your flowering system and things like that. It's not going to work out well. Um, Other great options if you're doing aquaponics systems are the dwarf shrimp, cherry shrimp, blueberry shrimp, King Kong shrimp, yellow shrimp, all those little tiny mandarin shrimp. All those little shrimps breed extremely well in raft beds. They go from $1 to $90 a piece. You can breed thousands of them out real easy underneath your lettuce or your clones or whatever you're doing in a raft system, and it works real well. As far as different interesting ones to do. And then you have your freshwater shrimps like your red clawed crabs, or red claw crayfish, and there's a couple of other freshwater shrimps, larger ones, and freshwater prawn, which require salt water to breed briefly, and some other things that get trickier to raise depending on what you're doing with them, and things like that. So.
Right on.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Yeah. And then what else? Freshwater clams are fine, but just remember they strip a ton of calcium from the water. So that can cause issues because of how much calcium and alkalinity they uptake from the water, especially if you have them in high populations. They don't harm the fish the way the mussels do, but they can clog your plumbing in the same way.
Yeah, I actually looked into those when I, obviously I knew I had a lot of calcium in my water that I needed to consume or neutralize in some way so it wouldn't cause lockout issues. So I chose to grow a bunch of kale because we love kale chips. But that's how I learned about their calcium consumption and their concerns in aquaponics, because you could actually use that to your advantage if you know you have a lot of calcium in your system and you want to keep it from building up. Then and let's say you can't, maybe you don't like kale, or you don't have the grow bed space to do that, or whatever it is. It could be something you could use to your advantage by adding a few of them and help bring down the mineralization of your water. Actually, I think somebody asked about that last week, didn't they? Was asking about water softeners. So that might be another thing to consider if you have extremely hard water, want to bring it down.
Yeah, just be careful how much sodium it's putting in, because a lot of softeners add a lot of sodium to the water.
Cool.
Yeah, that can cause some issues, but yeah. As far as that goes. What about fish? What kind of fish are you running, and how have you experienced with and all that I could talk about?
Well, I started with the feeder goldfish. I've had some of those for quite a while now. Probably, I don't know, I would say like a solid 2.5 years now. I've had some of them, and they were just the 25-cent goldfish from the market, so that's been pretty cool. So then I moved on to koi. I've had and had and still have a few Plecostomus that I put in like one of my sump tanks. Those have all done just fine, except for when it gets really cold outside. They tend to not like the cold as much. Um, and then I've had catfish, which I've gotten more recently. They've sort of been the last ones that I got, and I had them inside for probably like 6 months or so, and everything was fine with them until I put them outside and the water temperature started rising as the weather got hot, and then they started breeding, or I guess fighting is the more appropriate word for it. Um, so those have been all the ones that I've dealt with personally. We had some of the big-eyed goldfish too. I forget what they call it. What are they? Mulgores, something like that. And
telescope.
yeah, so just basically just fun goldfish that my kids pick out at the pet store. I mean, nothing terribly fancy or anything. But yeah, we talked about this before. I have an asshole koi that just smashes them and like pops their eyes and kills them. We named him Donald Trump because he attacks everything that doesn't look like him. And he actually does have a big orange spot right here on his forehead, so that's pretty funny. So yeah, those have all been, I would say that probably the koi and the goldfish are the most hardy and are the easiest to care for, I guess. The catfish were pretty much the same except for the whole fighting issue. If you let the water get too warm, they'll start wanting to breed. And when they start wanting to breed, then they start fighting with each other. Then after they breed and they lay eggs, then they still fight with each other. So from what I read, basically the male will protect the eggs from the female who will try to eat them. And it's pretty much a fight to the death, apparently. I think I had 6 fish or so that I ended up losing from essentially just scars and from fighting. You can see like the teeth marks on basically like right on top. So they bite on the top of the head and top of the tail.
The highlighted tank. There can be only one.
They're fucking assholes, man. I'm telling you. And I only have one koi that's that way.
The 10 o'clock cage match.
Yeah, but so that definitely happened. So I haven't done it yet, but I put the shade on top of the tank, which helped a lot. But I did just find some more eggs, but luckily I got them out of there before they started fighting too much. So I got those out. The first eggs never hatched or anything. I don't know what happened with them, but I did find them stuck in the pump. So that's probably has something to do with it. So I just fed those to the koi. They loved it. They tore them apart. It was awesome. And so the second group I just threw back in the tank, and we'll see what happens. So they're just in a separate little 10-gallon tank right now. But yeah, so those have been all the different fish that I've raised. I haven't had tilapia. I've read a lot about them, but I haven't had them. They don't really like them here in Oregon. You actually have to get a permit to do it here in Jackson County. Shocking. Another permit. So it's not that much. It's like $20 or something like that. But I just never really wanted to deal with it. So it was a lot easier to just go buy some at the pet store. And then the catfish I just got from a friend of mine who has an aquaponics farm here locally. So that was kind of nice to just scoop up some of those. Little barter system action, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and as far as fish goes, I've worked in the pet trade for an extremely long time. I've kept anything you can imagine at this point. If it's interesting, I've kept it for some length of time. Um, if you're interested in some cooler stuff, you can do piranhas, pacu. Um, uh, you can do a lot of cooler, bigger fish, freshwater fish. Tell your local pet shop, hey, I actually have a bigger system, a couple 100 gallons. Like, order me something interesting. You can take those big red tail catfish that you see other idiots buying and putting into a 55-gallon, and you can raise them up big. You can take those shovel nosed catfish, those big, clown knife or those Oscars, or those other really big predator fish that normally you really shouldn't have any right keeping in an aquarium. Realistically, like, you can keep all that and have it be comfortably housed and really well filtered by your system. You don't have to eat your fish. You could just have you do arowanas or an arapaima, depending on how you're licensed and what state you live in. And freshwater stingrays put out urea instead of ammonia. They're another very interesting option. There's all different kinds of cool stuff that you can put in your system. You don't have to necessarily limit yourself, but as far as food fish, channel catfish are good, yellow perch are good, um, bluegill are good, easy to raise. You know, the tilapia, real easy. Um, all those are great. Oscars are another good one. I know some people raise and eat. I have a buddy of mine who does that over in Colorado, raises and eats Oscars, and gets a whole bunch. So it's kind of interesting. But you can do all different kinds of fish. You don't have to limit yourself, and find out whatever's local and contact your local fish and game and find out what the local recommended aquaculture species are. They're more than happy to tell you what they want you to grow most of the time, and they're also more than happy to tell you the your easiest nearby place to get it, so that you can be legal and not worry about breaking local ordinances with your fish laws. Some places tilapia are illegal, some places this are illegal, some places that are illegal. So it just keeps you out of trouble, and it's a great way to find out the local places without you having to do anything that's going to get you into anything that's you want to get in.
If you do want to raise fish that you can eat, you can always look up your local hatcheries, and usually there's a list of them on your state website. And then you can just call any of those, and then they'll ask you, you can ask them about what they have. They usually, like here in Oregon, you can get a list of who they are, where they're located, what kind of fish they have, and the contact information. So you can call them up and say, hey, I want to pick up, X number of tilapia or X number of rainbow trout hatchlings. And then they'll be like, oh, well, do you have your such and such permit? Or, they should be able to answer most of your questions about what you need based on what you want. That's how I found out the information about tilapia and catfish and different things here. Most of the ones that are considered an invasive species are going to require, some type of permit. But usually, like I said, it's only like, less than $20 or so. To be able to have, I think they call it like a fish handler's permit or something like that, where basically you just are licensed to handle live fish, but there's not really anything there's not like a test you have to take or anything. It's basically just a fee. So I'm not really sure why, other than just to collect money, I guess, because that's all you do is they take your money and then you can get the fish. So I don't know, but so I would check your local website or your state website for a list of hatcheries, and you can do like bluegill, catfish, tilapia. Obviously, is a popular one because they grow so fast and they're so easy to breed, which I guess is another thing that you have to consider also. Is if if it's your goal to be sustainable, breeding is an important part of that, so you don't have to keep getting fish. You can raise something like tilapia or catfish, in which they're not difficult to breed necessarily, as long as you can set aside a tank for that, or even another small system for it, so that you can continue to raise your own fish and populate your own systems and continue to eat them. So breeding, I think, is probably one of the things that gets overlooked when you're raising fish for food. So definitely consider that and look into it when you're thinking about raising your food to eat, or I guess your fish to eat.
Absolutely.
So I know I consider trout, but it required a lot cooler water than a lot of the other fish did. A lot cooler and cleaner water for any of the rainbow trout that you can get here locally at most of the hatcheries. definitely seemed like it was that I could probably put them in like late, or I would say early fall or mid fall, and then pull them out late spring and be able to get them to, essentially pan size. But other than that, the water would just get too hot too fast unless you had like a water chiller or something else more complicated than I wanted to tackle. But I think trout would be my preferred fish to eat if I was going to raise fish for food primarily. That's for sure.
Yep. Trout are good, but the issue is that they run really cold. So for cannabis in particular, they aren't the best option. Great for winter crops and things though. Or some people do some decoupled systems with different temperatures and stuff, but that gets pretty wonky. And it's a lot of extra plumbing for just
Too many points
growing
of
one
failure
fish
for
when you
me.
can. Yeah, that's a lot of extra failure points and a lot of extra headache and a lot of extra investment, and a bunch of other crap that you just don't need. Which will get me on a rant about disconnected systems if we keep going on about that. So, let's talk about system. So, your main system, you're going to have usually some grow beds and a fish tank. Your grow beds, are going to usually be pre-made beds or a liner, Durascrim, Ultra Scrim, whatever Scrim, whatever. I think there's some other crap out there now. I'm trying to
Barrels.
think of what else. Barrels, you know, child pools. Um, I don't know. Any container, an old freezer, fridge, horse trough, you name it.
Literally the kitchen sink.
Anything you can think of. Yeah, kitchen sink.
Even the kitchen sink.
Um,
I've seen bathtubs.
bathtubs, windows, sill planters, buckets, whatever. So, yeah.
I wouldn't recommend terracotta pots though. That's probably the one thing, because they can mess with the pH. I haven't tried it, but it's been there was a lot of information on it at least. So I don't know if you messed with it or not, but from what I understand, spikes pH pretty hard.
For which one?
For terracotta pots, like the
Terracotta can, yes. Yep.
Yeah.
But it doesn't normally, but it can depending on how new it is.
I might have to test it. I have a couple of
Yeah,
them.
if it's been outside in the weather, then you're fine.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's a good hide for your fish and stuff. Can be. So it's cut PVC. You've got some scraps left over, some ends you cut off or whatever. Just toss it in the bottom of your tank, at least until your harvest. Throw some strings on it so you can just pull it up when you're done or whatever. So we talked about the different liners. As far as plumbing goes, I know in Jamaica we did a couple of NFT systems that were short with PVC going to bamboo. That was kind of cool. When I go back down there, we'll have some more video, and hopefully I can show you some of that stuff. And you can also use regular PVC. There's nothing wrong with PVC. Every once in a while, I'll get one of these crazy threads about on one of the random forums about, oh, the PVC is bad and we need something else, and blah, blah, blah. You can go with the PVC-free plastic piping, but it's going to cost you about 5 times as much, which is like better than electrical grade leach level. There's just no need for it. You're not running anything corrosive. It's just fish water, plus a little bit of nutrients. There's no need for it.
Right, and it's low temperature.
Yep. Don't use primer. Just use your PVC glue and your plumbing, your PVC. The primer actually does have some stuff that is a little bit toxic, especially in the recirculating system, and for your fish. So don't use primer. Just use the regular old glue and PVC.
I don't use anything. I just honestly, like my last system that I just rebuilt outside, and the one on the other one, I built it so that all the like all the PVC joints were over the top of the tank, so they dripped a little bit at first, and then they just drip right back into the tank. And now fish poop has clogged up everything, so just pressure fit together. So if you want to check out that's on my outdoor grow. There's a video that shows how that's set up, I think, on the one of the playlists. But I really like that trough style tank with the beds over the top of it. So if there's any issue, it just goes right back down into the tank, and then you don't have to worry about gluing anything together. So you can, if I have like an issue with roots growing down into it or something, I can just pop it apart and clean it out, and pop it back together. And I haven't had to do that yet, but it would be no issue to take it apart and clean it out if necessary. Like I have a net pot that goes over the top of the drain on the inside of the bed at the bottom where it goes out, keeps media out of it. But I'm sure roots will work its way down in at some point, but they would have to grow out of the bed all the way down through the bottom pipe and then up over the top of the U siphon before it would become an issue. But I just think that you can set it up so that you don't need to use any of that glue if necessary. But I know like the cement and stuff, a lot of people have used that without the primer, like you were saying, and had good luck with that. But it can be difficult to get apart. So just make sure you want it to be stuck together.
You just cut it after the joints so that you can put a slip fitting back on it, a slip.
Yeah.
Female.
It'll be together. That's that's for sure. So if you ever want to take it apart, then don't glue it. And fish poop plugs all holes. Really does.
Or what you do is you cut in and you put some union joints. And a union joint allows you to unscrew the pipe at any place you want. So you glue in your ends where the union joint comes in, and then you screw it together, and it fits in. And then you can unscrew it and detach that section of pipe whenever you want, which are real nice depending on what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I put so on that particular siphon, it's an external siphon. So the two beds face each other. They come into a T, and then the T drops down a little bit as a crossbar that connects in with the other one. And the U siphon comes up over the top out of another T in between those two. So, and then on the end of my U siphon, I have a ball valve, so you can adjust the resistance to make it easier to stop and start. So, if you're looking at setting up something besides a bell siphon, definitely you can check out loop siphons or U siphons, external siphons. Those are all three names for the same thing, by the way. So don't, if you're just checking them out, then, it's just different ways of doing the same thing. The siphon, is basically the same thing as a bell siphon. All it does is it makes your beds fill and drain, and, using water pressure and pushing the air out of the pipe. It's all based on the same principles. So, and there's plenty of videos about that. So you can look up U siphons or external siphons, bell siphons. All these are just different methods of getting your the water level inside your bed to vary, so that you have like an air diaphragm for your roots. So it pushes out stale air when the water fills up, and it draws in fresh air when it pulls out. So it gives your roots access to air and nutrients in a variated manner, sort of like breathing for your roots. And I've definitely highly recommend some type of siphon system, whichever one you feel like you can build. I really don't think it matters as long as it fills and drains and runs, then it's fine. They all have different concerns, so definitely check them out and see which one you like. I personally like external siphons or U siphons, whatever you want to call them. They maximize your grow bed space because you don't have to have anything on the top of it, as long as you make sure you can keep stuff out of your drain in the same way that you do with a bell siphon. You can attach more than one to a bed, which you really can with a bell siphon too, but everybody nowadays seems to build one for every bed. So like I have 4 barrel beds that all run on the one siphon, so you only have to build one for each bed, or you don't have to build one for each bed. So I don't know. Siphons, that's pretty much, my recommendation is to learn how they work and to use one of them, whichever one you feel like you're the most confident in. You can order kits off of eBay for pretty cheap. I don't even know what they are, but I know that one guy in the aquaponics group has been selling them for a while, and they're pre-cut. You can just basically fit them together. You can do the same thing with um, external siphons. You can just go to Home Depot and buy all the parts and put it together like Legos, basically. So just understand those principles and then apply one of them. I don't know. I'm not a big raft guy. I don't know, Steve, maybe you can talk a little bit more about rafts, but I'm not a big fan of them. I mean, I guess maybe if you're trying to grow a shit ton of lettuce, but
yeah, if you're doing lettuce or leafy greens, are good, but they're not good for cannabis at all.
right. And even when you do have lettuce or any of that stuff, they still require a lot of aeration. So they don't have that same process to where the roots get exposed to air. I mean, I guess you could do I mean, I guess that's not really a raft bed at that point. So it filled and drained, it wouldn't be floating. So it would just be more like a medialess grow bed. I don't know. If you had a way to sort of suspend them and allow the water to just fill and drain. But yeah, so I don't know. What do you recommend for rafts or sites?
I've actually seen a full-blown I've seen someone that tried to do or was doing a full-blown DR raft system before, which was interesting. I had pots that were on top of a raft. It was different. I had never seen someone try to do that before, so that was interesting. I can't comment more beyond that, but someone I'm working with, it was pretty interesting.
I guess media is something else we could talk about too. If you want to talk about, continue on the 101 theme, if you are going to put in grow beds, what are you going to use for grow media is a pretty important topic.
Yeah, hydrogen or aqua rocks are really good. Those are the two I've used the most.
So basically expanded clay, right?
Yeah, basically expanded clay medias. The hydrogen is really nice because it's round and you can just jam your hands in it all day long and it's not going to tear your hands up. That's probably the thing I like about it the most.
Mm-hmm.
But any kind of media like that will work just fine. Soilless media. Oh, I would say avoid grow stones because while they are awesome, that they are high in silica and they're fine to put in as a percentage of your media. Anything below, I would say 20 or 30%. They do raise your pH quite a bit because of it. So make sure that you use that. Maybe one bag of that for every 3 bags of hydrogen or something like that, or 4 bags of hydrogen if you're going to try and save a little bit of money.
You can
it's definitely something I recommend because you can passively add the silica. What's that?
You can soak the grow stones. I found a bag of them on sale somewhere. I think it was Fred Meyer or something like that. It was on sale for 50% off. So it was like in the clearance section.
Okay,
so
you can get it real cheap sometimes.
Yeah, just got lucky. Otherwise, it's actually kind of expensive, and so I kind of feel like you should probably just go with hydrogen anyway. Like you're just comparing full price to full price. But it was there, and I hadn't used it, and I always like fucking with new shit. So, and that was a while ago. I think this was probably like a year and a half ago, something like that. Anyway, but you can soak them. So what I did is, because I read about the pH issues after I bought it, and so you can soak them. I did mine, I think it was 3 or 4 nights in a row where basically I just soaked them in my well water and then dumped it out and then refilled it and did that. I'm pretty sure it was 3 nights in a row and then just kept testing it until it stopped driving the pH up. And then it worked just fine after that. I didn't have any more pH spike issues. And that was actually a recommendation on their website, like a response from one of their people on driving up the pH. So if you have some or want to use it or whatever reason, you can't soak it repeatedly in water outside of your system and then just keep testing it until it stops driving up the pH in the water, and then it's good to
I
throw
would
it.
say that's yeah, but the reason why it's doing that is because it's adding silica, so it's really good as a passive silica additive. Just I guess might be a hindrance if you're starting off with a really high pH. That's why you don't want to use much of it. You know, a little bit's fine. It'll help balance everything. But
That
don't
must be
go crazy.
why the weeds in my backyard were so tough this year, because I poured all that silica out last year. I
Yep.
mean, I probably just leached it out, honestly.
Just poured it into your veggie garden. It would have kicked butt
I should
for
have.
the the squash and all,
I just grew some killer
cucumbers
weed.
and all that stuff.
Not weeds.
Awesome weeds. So we're trying. We're doing a big test at one of my partner's houses out in Colorado. My girlfriend out there, and my she they put some biochar down on a big acreage for some hemp, testing it out, and man, does that stuff grow the weeds as well as hemp really well. Definitely boosted the weed production as far as the thistle and other things on
Yeah.
top of everything else.
This spring, like after, like when it first started warming up, like my whole soil garden back there was just like, there were literally like, the weeds you get with like the bright pink flowers. I don't know what they are, but over here we get them all over the place. They were literally like climbing up all of the fencing from the plants from last year, and like they were seriously probably like 7.5 feet tall, just growing right up it, big bright pink. They're like, oh sweet. So I just chopped them all down and took all the flowers and threw them in the worm bin, let them eat them up.
Yeah, it works really well.
I know a lot of people make like ferments out of them too.
Yep. So let's talk about that tea brewing and fermentation stuff. So you want some buckets and some lids, maybe one of those air sealers like you would for doing fermented beverages. You drill the hole and it has a little loop in it. You put water in. That's another good
Right.
one. Let the air out but not in. Gas out but not in. If you're doing labs, and then for teas, you're looking to do just some air stones in a bucket. You want to talk about what maybe you do for that stuff?
Yeah, so I have a couple of different ways of doing it. I have what I do is a bokashi bucket. So in my kitchen, I have a bucket with some water and some this stuff. This is some EM1 bokashi that I got from Terragenics. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. But so there's the Terragenics right there. So that's the website I got it from. And they call it a compost accelerator. And so I use this bokashi and EM1 in sort of like a pre-soak for all of my fruits and different stuff like that. And then it all goes in, and it all goes into the worm bin. So from there, it gets broken down, eaten by the worms, and I run water through that worm bin, collect the juice, and then I can do a couple of different things with it. I can make an aerated compost tea, or I can use it to make fermentations. So I'll mix it like 10-to-1 with water and make fermentations with it as kind of like an inoculant. And those are anaerobic fermentations, so you don't use an air stone in those. It actually would hinder what you're trying to do. So, and I'll do fermentations of a lot of different stuff. Like I have some bananas that go bad, or I'll I'll do like sprouted seed teas, which is a little bit different, but a lot of times I'll blend those up and add them to a fermentation. And so essentially you're just adding microbial life with a food source, kind of like what you do in an aerobic tea. And then you give it some time to break down those food sources into nutrients. So usually I do the anaerobic teas, I feed right into the dual root zone, as opposed to the aerobic teas, which I usually use an air stone to bubble those up with a little bit of molasses, or a lot of times I'll just use fish tank water from the sump tank as a food source and bubble those up for usually about 24 hours. And then I will spray those on as a foliar spray. So yeah, those are pretty much the two ways that I use both anaerobic and aerobic teas. And you basically just brew them differently, and you're looking for a diversity of microbes as opposed to one specific kind. And then labs, for instance, they can be either anaerobic or aerobic. I think there's a name for that. Steve, do you know what that is?
I forget.
Starts with an F, I think. Wish Alan was here. He could tell me. He talks about it all the time. Anyway,
buddy you were talking about that'll hopefully be a guest here soon?
Oh no, the guy that I hope I'll get from the guest is from the Weed for Warriors guy from Illinois. I was on their podcast and he offered to come on to ours, so hopefully we'll be able to get him later this week. And we can talk about some stuff for veterans and some of his experiences. So I think that would be great.
We'll figure out what day works for him, and then we can do even a shorter podcast or something around that, even if we have to.
Yeah, I'm thinking Thursday, but we'll hammer that out and see what we can do.
Okay. that sounds good.
So yeah, so the labs, the Lactillus bacillus, it can be either one. So some of your microbes can be both anaerobic or aerobic, and so I think that you can definitely use them in different ways. But for the most part, I either feed them in the dual root zone or I spray them on as a foliar spray. I have just poured them right into media beds or even right into tanks before. I think we've talked about this a couple of times on our previous shows, but I haven't noticed a huge difference between where I add it into the system as opposed to one being better than the other. So, and I've done various methods. So, but that's pretty much what I do now is I'll either do the foliar spray with the aerobic, and then the anaerobic fermentations are all pour into the media beds. So I did get some of this. I haven't added any into the aquaponics system yet. I dusted some of the plants in the soil garden, but I did get some of this rock phosphate, which is, there we go, which is another nice way that you can add in, because this is a dry amendment, and I think you can see on the back there, it's just available phosphate and calcium. So you can use these on your plants that are going to be flowering heavy, whether it's cannabis, obviously needs a lot of phosphorus in the flowering stage, or you're feeding, like we were talking about before, cucumbers, tomatoes, bell peppers, hot peppers, corn, pretty much any of that stuff that you're going to use. You're going to want to have for your heavier feeding plants, something like that. Let's see. This was what I tried to show on that. We had that one episode where we nobody could stream video, which was odd. But this was the iron that I got from Roger over at the True Aquaponics store. He's got a list of stuff that you can use for supplements that's guaranteed fish safe. and he's a great source for stuff, especially if you need things like a specialized iron supplement for high pH or different things like that that you really want to make sure are fish safe. He does a lot of homework, maybe even some extra homework in some cases, about what's fish safe and not. He's even got some great stuff like heaters if you want to put in a relatively good size heater. He's even got underwater camera for pretty cheap that you can hook up to your phone. He's got some pretty neat stuff over at the, I hope I'm saying that right. Isn't it the True Aquaponics store, right, Steve?
Yep.
Cool. So those are kind of like some basic nutrients that they can do. I guess I like the dry powder because you can, mix it in, whether you want to just dust it on top of the roots of a plant, in a media bed, or you want to mix it into a tea and then feed it. It just seems like an easier way of dealing with them. Do you have any preference in terms of nutrient-wise, what you like to feed, or do you feed to the dual root zone, or do you feed outside of it?
Yeah, so iron, potassium, calcium, all that kind of stuff. Magnesium, I'll add directly into the main water system, and then most of my micros I'm trying to, I have a passive, silica would be the other one that I try to maintain a minimum level in the water, because it does make such a huge difference, and that's something that we really, really need to help push more in the aquaponic world, is that, silica is key, as important as all those other nutrients, potassium or phosphorus or anything else, at preventing, especially in these higher humidity environments like aquaponics and things like that, or even organic hydro and all that stuff. You really, really, really need to focus on your silica levels to make sure that you aren't, you're doing your best to battle those fungal issues.
Right. So I mean,
that's what and then I'm adding most of my PK, later on by a flower. Although one of the other things I was going to mention when we get to it is, once you get late in flower, you don't need any more phosphorus. Especially your last 5 or 6 weeks, you don't really need much phosphorus. It's just all the way up until that bud structure formation happens, and then it's mostly potassium that's feeding the flowers at the late part. I was reading more and more about, and talking to somebody out here about how that works and the chemical, how that all works on the chemical level, and you really don't need anywhere near as much. The biggest reason why they push the phosphorus stuff is because monopotassium phosphate is super cheap, and it's kind of like your go-to bloom booster, so it's an easy way for them to do it. But if you dialed it in, you would actually, if you're doing it perfectly for the plant, you really would dial back your phosphorus. You get more color out of your plants too if you're trying for purple and blue.
Right, and I definitely see that too, because I don't supplement, a lot of my plants end up turning like purple stemmed, or the leaves, turn a little bit more purple, especially in that like mid range of flowering, because I don't, they probably are lacking phosphorus, or probably at the very least are pushing all of that to bud structure, and not so much to the stem, and so. And I think you'd run into the, basically the same thing with any of those heavier feeding plants would do that. And I have well water here, so that's probably the biggest reason that I don't really have to supplement at all. But I do have this now, which I got, and I'll for my raspberries and peppers, where I'm basically just sprinkling onto those and experimenting with it. And then probably my next run, I will add some to the castings before I put it into the dual root zone layer. So that way I'll just mix it in sort of beforehand, which is another great thing about dry stuff, is that you can, just sort of mix it in. So what I do, or at least what I did this time, which is the first time I set up the dual root zone, was I basically just like wet some and then left it out to dry, so it didn't get like bone dry, but just so that it wasn't super moist right when I put it in, so I didn't end up like rotting the stem or anything like that. So I spread it out and then just let it dry out. So probably what I'll do the next time is I'll add a little bit to this at the beginning, and then also right when they go into flower is when I was filling up the other probably like 30% that I left open with fresh castings. So like when my outdoor goes into flower this time, I will take and set up those castings, dust all that stuff on, wet it all down, let it all dry out, and then transplant all those in with that batch of castings, so it's not super wet and sticky when I put it in. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Which my plants have been doing a lot better in the wind. I know that was one of the things that we talked about. Like, I still don't. It takes a lot longer to set up each plant when you're, as opposed to just like sticking it in the bed and letting it go. But it definitely is a lot more stable in the wind out there, especially, I made that horsetail tea, which is just full of silica. And so my plants are like right now in the indoor, after I think I've fed it a couple of times now on the indoor, and it's like pushing the net up as opposed to being bent down by it. Like, the stalks are extremely strong. Like, on the outdoor, the biggest plant, I think the stalk is about like that big around at the base already, and it's not a huge plant anyway. So it's been it's been good. That horsetail tea, was just this stuff. Horsetail, I already showed. The stuff here, the EM1, just in a bucket with some water. I cut it fresh. I found it here. It grows here locally. And I don't remember. I think I read about it. It seems like it was pretty common in North America, but at least all over this area, and definitely over there where you're at too, you should be able to find plenty of it. Horsetail fern. Just soaked it, let it go, and it's got some of the highest concentration of silica. So it's been great for my plants. It comes, I got the recipe or the idea from the Probiotic Farmers Alliance, the PFA group. They do that a lot and feed it to their living soil plants. So I did that this year, and all my plants have really responded well to it. So definitely recommend that too. Oh, speaking of which, from the PFA group, there's a guy in there, Luke. He's actually over there in Arcata, I believe, from this place here called T-Lab. So I'll send you his info. You can check out some of his stuff. He makes some really advanced tea brewing equipment for aerobic teas. He has some he uses fish hydroslate in a lot of his stuff too. He's done aquaponics and other stuff, and he sent me this. They call it Soil Life inoculant, and if you read the side, this is the one that's for breaking down silica. So I added that when I fed the horsetail tea also. So that should be a source of silica and the microbes to break it down. And I've noticed a definite difference in the size and the rigidity of the stalks in both the indoor and the outdoor. So if you can find some horsetail fern.
Horsetail is great. I know a buddy of mine uses it to treat his gout and stuff.
Yeah, I guess gout, like skin conditions, urinary tract infections, arthritis. There's I have no idea, but anyway, it's great for silica. It's easy to find. It's easy to harvest. It pulls right out. You can cut it down. You don't even really need any tools if you don't want to. It pulls out so easy. You just grab it, tear it right off. It's kind of cool. It's like it's a plant that still has spores, like a mushroom. So it's kind of a interesting plant. It has like different male and female shoots, I guess. Anyway, I was reading about it when I went to go find some. Actually, I found some on our own property down there in Northern California. So I was lucky to find a huge patch of it. It kind of grows all over down there. So Just chopped a bunch of it down when I was visiting my dad, and brought it back up here. Made a couple buckets full, and oh, that was one thing I was going to ask you actually. I made a lot of it. Is there? I mean, obviously you can overfeed anything. So what would be a symptom, which I couldn't really find this online either, what would be a symptom of too much silica in your system?
Too much silica, um, you can have some issues with too much of it. It'll start to shed it out some of the leaves. You'll get some yellowing, and it'll dump the leaves. You know, it'll put a whole bunch of it in a couple sacrificial leaves and dump it out. I guess that would be the first sign. I don't know if I've seen silica toxicity in cannabis before. I I
I was just wondering because I
always see the deficiency whenever the toxicity. To be
right, which
honest with you.
there's a lot of info on deficiency, which obviously that makes sense. But um, you know, I was just wondering how much I should be adding to the teas when I add them. Like I basically just add it right before I feed my aerated tea, so I'll just add it right to that and then spray it
Well,
out.
it totally depends on what form. You know, if you're going to use it as a pH adjuster like potassium silicate, then you're going to add enough to adjust your pH. If you're going to use it as like a dip, or you're going to use like
That would drive
Grower's
your
Magic,
pH up, right?
or yeah, or you're going to use Grower's Magic or Kita Silica, which is like a zeolite or quartz based, depending on which of the two products you're using. Um, you know, that's going to not raise your pH, and that would be fine. You know, you can go much heavier with it, but even you have to go pretty crazy with it, and it doesn't really lock out anything real quickly or anything like that. So it's not, you know, again, most of the time you're, especially the woodier plants, cannabis is going to be using a ton of it anyway. So it's just something I've never seen. I've seen always the deficiency and never the toxicity, like I was saying.
Well, I'll just keep feeding it then. We'll see what happens. Like right now, I bet.
I was trying to find pictures of it. I can't even find it on Google.
Yeah, I already looked too. I couldn't find much of anything. Like a couple of other people in like IC Mag forums had asked about it, but that was about it.
I mean, if I end up getting, if
Yeah,
I end up getting some kind of tiny system, I'm happy to just, and someone wants to help me just dump an ungodly amount of silica in, and I'm happy to try it just so that we have it for scientific purposes. But man, I'm
I think
having, there's a couple of random pictures of crumpled up leaves, but that's about it.
yeah, I think I'll do that in like maybe like my front porch system or something like that. It's got a bunch of tomatoes and peppers and stuff in it anyway. I seriously have like I think I have like 3.5 5-gallon buckets of like strained horsetail tea. So it's a lot. And I only have like I have the outdoor plants that I can put it on too, but I only have like 10 total.
Yeah, there isn't a picture on Google as far as that goes. I'm trying to find even an article on silica toxicity in cannabis. Yeah. So, okay, hold on. Amsterdam Seed Bank. Yeah. No known toxic. Okay. Occasionally, symptoms of excess silica include deformed marijuana leaves, but no known toxicity symptoms have been found on a regular basis. So yeah, pretty much what we both said.
All right.
I know I've run
I'm
it
gonna
as
dump.
high, I've personally run it as high as 270 ppms in a system personally, and had zero negative impact on the system, other than maybe making it slightly harder to lower the pH, but that was about it. But even then, like, it wasn't really that big of an issue at all.
So I have like my front porch system. It's probably like, I don't know, maybe 80 gallons total. So I think I'm gonna pour in like 5 gallons
Yeah.
and just see what
So
happens, because it's got a ton of plants in it anyway. So I mean,
just
it's already,
be mindful of the pH, that you don't just spike your pH.
yeah, I test that all the time anyway.
No, I'm just saying when you add the silica,
Yeah,
be mindful.
we shall see.
So yeah, nutrient stuff. Well, you want a pH up, you want a pH down, and then you want your veg mix and your bloom mix, and then you want an iron, maybe a mag additive, cal mag or a mag. Magnesium carbonate's another great one that not many people talk about. I know we talked about it a little bit in the magnesium episode, but magnesium carbonate's definitely a great, underutilized, and you can get any reef tank store, or fish tank store will have magnesium carbonate for magnesium booster for saltwater tanks. Perfectly fine for using in home stuff and aquaponic usage. Hold on, click the wrong tab here. And then your bloom and your veg, depending on what you're using, and if you're doing teas or bottled or organic or non-organic or whatever you're doing, or dual root zone or non-dual root zone, you know, it's up to you. We talk about different nutrients every week and things, so you can kind of pick what you want from each of those. I'm gonna go back at some point here soon and try to cover which topics we cover in episodes, at least the bigger ones. Top five or what nutrients are covered or whatever. I know it's still on my to-do list. I've been moving and everything else, so life's been crazy, but it'll happen at some point. Um,
So we talked about um, when you go into flower, different stuff that you can use in your system. This is a good old maxi crop. It's always one that you can put in if you're seeing some deficiencies or you want to boost. Be aware, we'll turn your fish tank green. It just happens. It's not a big deal. And they always have instructions on that.
Potassium for sure.
So you can pretty much follow those. And so this is pretty much just all soluble potash.
Yep, just seaweed.
Yeah.
Other things you're gonna need are testing equipment. Other things you're gonna need are testing equipment. pH test kit, ammonia test kit, nitrite test kit, nitrate test kit. If you want to be serious, an iron test kit. There's also some potassium test kits coming out on the market now. Phosphorus test kit's pretty cheap and easy to get now. You can go as crazy as you want with the test kits, but at the very least, nitrate, pH, ammonia nitrite, iron, are the ones you need to, at the very least, get. Um, maybe once in a while sending out for an ag water report, just so you know what your macro micros are, so you can adjust those as needed. And do it that way. Um, Pots and burlap. You're in your pots, burlap, and soil and media. We talked about media, but burlap and pots. If I really recommend doing potted, even if you're not going to do it in a dual root zone, just so you can spin the plants. You can move them around if you want to move them around or need to transfer them between rooms or grow beds, or hide them because the helicopters are coming or whatever you got going on. Depending on where you're living. So that can make life a little easier as well. We talked about liners, sumps, and fish tanks. Water troughs work well. You can get really good, nice ones from Polytank. There's all different kinds of companies make different fish tanks. There's cloth tanks. We're actually found out there's a company that's going to be releasing a really cool smaller home system that's going to be sending us one. Can't tell you anything about it right now, but I'll be able to tell you here shortly once we get it. A cool aquaponic home system. it'll be much, cheaper and easier to use, set it up, and a lot of the stuff that's in the market will be pretty dope. We're gonna be growing some cannabis in it. That'll be pretty neat. We're gonna be showing that off to y'all, and that'll be revealed more information later in the year when they go public with it. Um, yeah, with that. What else for fish tanks? Pools, jacuzzis. They also make great fish tanks. Tubs make great fish tanks. Um, anything
You
I'm
ever get
forgetting?
concerned about
Swimming
leaching on some of
pools.
those, like some of those cheaper hot tubs and stuff that are made out of?
Not really. They're all fiberglass, and there's nothing really. If
There's
it's going to withstand high chlorine levels and peroxide, it's going to withstand fish poop.
right. Yeah,
Some
somebody
of the
asked me that
plumbing
because I
fittings you
and I
might
didn't
want to
know.
replace. But yeah, make sure there's no brass fittings or anything like that in the system. But that's about it.
Seems like you'd be a pain in the butt to take part and find out.
Yeah, sometimes also be mindful of your heater. Disconnect the heater for it. A lot of them have copper coils and copper plates inside to keep them antimicrobial. That's a big no-no with your plants and fish. So make sure that you go that route and um, do that. Make sure you disconnect that UV sterilizer as well. Make sure you disconnect that from a jacuzzi. Don't want to be running that. It will kill your microbes and screw up your zinc, your boron, and what is it, your manganese? I know I touched on it in at least one or two other episodes of the podcast. Um, I'm just stoned and tired at this point in the day, trying to remember off the top of my head. But yeah, there's a hydroponic food production, did a bunch of stuff on why that's bad. So did Aquaponic Source. Did some blog posts on it in the laboratory as well. If you're interested in that. Filtration. So I'm a big fan of radial flow filters or settling tank filters over swirling filters. Swirl filters just don't have the same gallons per hour and don't work quite as well as radial flows or settling tanks. Um, so depending on what type of filtration you're looking to do and what scale, if you're just doing something small, you don't need any kind of extra filtration. Just don't overfeed your fish. And then if you're doing a bigger system or a commercial system, you do need filtration. But just be mindful of something that's going to work efficiently for what you got. That's all. It's something you can separate the waste out and either resell it or reuse it or brew it up later to make more nutrient solution for your flowering stuff. Using in your dual root zone and all as a base nutrient solution. And then as far as lighting, right now ceramic metal halide is kind of the best that there is out there right now. Since ceramic high pressure sodium. There's some really kick-ass LEDs out there. Um, uh, what else is there? Plasma is out there, although I don't really like that because it puts out UVC. Most fixtures do, which can be tricky. Induction's another great one. Long lifetime, better for veg than flower, but they do really good. Um, and yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't really use fluorescent much unless you have to these days, but there's just so many better options. But you can use it if you have to.
Unless you want to do like super low temperature, but even then, probably a small LED would probably be better. But
yeah.
Sometimes all you can afford is a few CFLs in your closet. So.
Yep. I mean, grow with what you got to start off with and go from there for sure.
I would say probably LEDs or some sort of, like you were saying, CMH or metal halide, HVS, any of those quality ones would be fine. And there's usually a lot of, at least here, I don't know about, and I'm sure down there in Humboldt, probably Colorado also, but there's usually a fair amount of grow lights available on Craigslist, where I would highly recommend that you buy it for the fixture and the ballast and replace the bulb. Most of the time they're all going to say, oh, it's a brand new bulb when it's probably been ran for like 5,000 hours or some shit. But bulbs, replacing the bulbs are pretty cheap. So, definitely consider that too if you're looking to go the more inexpensive route or you can buy some pretty good used grow equipment and be able to just swap in new lights and have it work pretty well. So yeah, I would say that lighting is important. How you get it, not necessarily as important. So I have some cheap LEDs that I bought off of eBay that I like. They work really well. I'm running my indoor on it right now. Just know how much power they actually consume. I guess that's probably my one caveat to that is if you're going to buy LEDs, just understand how they work, and it's not just one light consuming one power. It's a whole bunch of lights linked together. So they try to tell you things like there's 600 watt lights when really they're only consuming like 250 watts total. So I think that the only power that is consumed is the only power that is turned into light energy. So if it's not consumed, it's not converted. So max power is really sort of garbage when it comes to LED. So compare actual LED wattage to the wattage of a different type of light, and you'll probably get a fairly good comparison on that. So that would be my advice if you're going to go the LED route. Is actual power consumption is what really matters.
Absolutely. We had another question come in while we were doing this. Fish Guy Ganja says, I'm running an entirely organic input into the soil section of my DR setup. Is there really any point in me removing the plants from the system and flushing? It would be efficient or effective to just water from the fish tank with sugary fish water that is super low nitrates for the last 2 weeks of the plant's life. Or would it just be as effective to just water from the fish tank with sugary water that is super low nitrates for the last 2 weeks of the plant's life? There really shouldn't be a lot of excess salt-based minerals in the soil with all the beneficials they have in there to break down what little salty nutrients I'm adding. Recharge, OG Bio warranties, and a crop ton of beneficials. Also, I'm high as shit when I let me know if it isn't clear, and I'll try to word it better. No, that makes sense. I actually don't flush my plants. I just feed them, like you were saying, just fish water and sugar the last couple of weeks, 2, 3 weeks, and that's all I do, man. Sometimes I'll give them like a lactobacillus or like a labs, or I'll brew up like a couple of different real sugary fruits in some water, mix it up and make like a lemonade almost, or like a not lemonade, but like grape juice and apple juice and sugary sweet stuff, pineapple juice. Blend that all together, some melon juice, and then pour that on and use that. But that's about the closest thing I'll do to a nutrient solution the last 2 or 3 weeks, especially
Yeah,
I'm
usually.
feeding pretty heavy with sugars the last 4 or 5 weeks. I'm definitely gonna go crazy, start ramping that up.
Yeah, microbes are always good to to break down what's there. To switch over to feed, I would say more microbes or more often. I usually switch back and forth anyway between feeding microbes and then feeding essentially food for microbes, I guess. So, and I do the same thing in my my outdoor soil grow as well. So, that's, I wouldn't add anything to like the dual root zone or, I only added compost, fresh castings to these indoor ones right when they went into flowers. So that was the only time I really added anything to those other than the compost tea, which I do twice a week for the first 4 weeks. And then after that, I don't really do anything but fish water. So I did the same thing even when I didn't have dual root zone. It just went right into the media bed. So yeah, now I'm going to be switching to just microbes from here on out. The last one I did was just microbes and water, and then just to be able to break down what is already there. And other than that, I don't flush anything either. I don't flush the outdoor either, except for I don't essentially just stop feeding it. So I wouldn't worry about like decoupling it or anything like that. Personally, especially if you're not using any salt-based fertilizers, then there's not really any buildup. Excuse me, that would be
Even if
be
you
the concern.
even if you do, as long as you're maintaining, pretty close, as long as you're paying attention to your ionic balance and what you're inputting, what's being uptaken, you can still keep a pretty good level on keeping stuff balanced because you're running lower levels than you would in hydro. You have a lot longer before you run into lockout times, and you can let stuff drift back down, and you can play with it a lot more, for sure.
Right. And so I guess maybe that's a good thing we can talk about really quick too while we're talking about microbes is, it's, obviously you're not feeding any nutrients when you're adding microbes. There's no real MPK value to it unless you're, some of them have, I think recharge has like a, what's it, like a 0.5, like a 0.50 or something like that. Some of them have some. Go ahead.
Oh, it's great to add, if you're not in the end of flower or whatever, or the end of your cycle, it's great to add a little bit of, what's it called? A little bit of, nutrients with your microbes, or adding a little bit of microbes every time you dose your nutrients, is an even better example.
Right. And so when we're talking about those, we're talking about stuff like this. This is a sample they sent me. I think, Steve, you got one too, right? From Mammoth P. So this is a phosphorus microbe. And then this is the one I got just at my local grow shop when I was down there before, which is they have a blue mix, which is what this one is. And they also have a veg mix as well. And it has, if you look on the back, it'll give you the list of different ones. You can look this up on their website too. And and there's no nutrients in either one of these. I mean, actually there is a little bit in this Mammoth one. It's a little bit of alfalfa extract. Basically just keeps it alive, but it's not really much. So for the most part, you're not really adding any nutrients. And this is a concentrate, so really you're only adding like, let's see. So even at the most, you're adding 4 milliliters per gallon. Yep. So you're not using very much of it, basically, when you're mixing it in. So I switch over to feeding just microbes from here on out. So like I said, I just posted a picture in the group of the Starfighter. So pretty much from about that stage on, I don't really feed anything else anyway. Whereas a lot of times, in that at least traditional hydro would tell you to flush like the last 2 weeks, for instance, anyway. And those are the people that are using high amounts of salt and base fertilizers and stuff like that would see buildups and have it become an issue. But I don't think in organic probiotic like living soil or tendered living organics or whatever you want to call it for essentially living soil, using probiotic growing methods, I guess. I don't think that there's any reason to do a flush personally. And I never flush any of mine any more than essentially just stop feeding them. You got any other questions, Steve?
No, I think that's all the questions that we've gotten for today. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on or cover?
Don't think so. I brought
Anything
up.
else you want to talk about? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I don't think so. I brought up all my little goodies here. I think I've pretty much shown off all the stuff that I've got here. So that was pretty much the stuff that I get asked about all the time. Is the stuff that I use and how I use it. So we talked about the worm bin, and I think I'll shoot a video on that on my worm bin also because I haven't done that yet. Sorry, my cat's freaking out. So I'll probably shoot a video on that, basically, just kind of the basics of it and how it works. But I use it to break down, you know, and supplement pretty much, all my aquaponic systems. So it's probably like one of the main sort of workhorses. And then I guess we didn't really talk about that either. Red worms is another important thing you can use as a filtration. Adding that to your media beds is a great way to help break down solids. And if you've got anywhere to add them in, I highly recommend them. They can survive in the water. You'll find them in your filter and everywhere else. I've they'll just pretty much maintain their own population, and they eat their own dead. They manage their own population. There's really not many downsides to having red worms in your system. So definitely highly recommend adding those in for sure. Not earthworms. Earthworms require dirt in order to live. So definitely don't put earthworms in. They also won't eat their own dead. So if they die, they'll basically just turn into slime in your media bed. So avoid earthworms. You could use earthworm castings to make a tea and then supplement with that. That definitely would be something that you could do. You would run the risk of getting some earthworms in your beds because of it, but you could definitely give it a go. But yeah, red worms for sure. Steve, I'm sure you've ran them for a while, right?
Yep, I've run red worms, red wigglers, Gambia worms, or I think they're called Gambia. Hold on. Grendel worms. That's it. Grendel worms. Gambia worms.
Red wiggler worms
Grendel
are,
worm.
obviously,
Yeah.
we're talking about red ones. They're cheap and easy to find.
Yeah, Grindel worms, micro worms, black worms, tubiflex worms, red wigglers, earthworm, earthworms. All your different bait worms will work. Earthworms normally don't live all that well in the system; they're just too big. But Grindel worms, I really like. What's the other one? Black worms a lot because they get down into the sludge in the bottom of your grow bed and really break that down. They're also great baby fish food. And this help break down a lot of the crap and the sludgy stuff, the anaerobic areas and things. They work extremely well for that stuff. So
Cool.
yeah. Alrighty. Is there anything else you want to touch on?
I don't think so. I think we got through all your stuff there on wanted to cover on your 101 list. So, if you guys have any other questions or anything, throw them in chat or post. Obviously,
Or comment or email. I'd love to hear your questions. Love answering them. Gives us topics and stuff to talk about on the show. Please feel free to give us your questions.
Yeah, so you can always find this on YouTube. Obviously, Steve's channel is Ponics, the one we're live streaming on right now. Mine is AP Meds, so you can always check me out on there. We have the Aquaponic Cannabis Growers group where you can post questions to also, questions and pictures. So that's on Facebook, and so we post stuff on there periodically, just to share ideas and concepts. So you can always hit us up there. Yeah. Anything else you got, Steve?
No, just a shout out to realgrowers.com and dudegrows.com for hosting us over there as well. Check out the website. My website's potentponics.com. You mentioned the YouTube channels, also potentponics on Twitter. Whenever I post the channel and when the website's going to go, or the podcast is going to go up, it goes up on Twitter as well. So if you're looking to find out when they're going to happen, sometimes on short notice, just subscribe to the Twitter. I'm trying to think what else. You can email me at potentponics@gmail.com. Working on a bunch of different projects. If you happen to need help with a bigger aquaponic cannabis project, email Marty or myself, and we're happy to help. I think that's about it. I will have some different guests in the show. Vlad's going to be on the show a lot more often in the future. And that's about it. I think hopefully we'll have this gentleman from the Veterans Warriors group. What's it called again?
Yeah, We for Warriors.
Yeah, Weed for Warriors.
Yeah, We for Warriors. They're out of Illinois, so they do have a medical program over there, and so obviously their focus is on helping the veterans. Everybody from the PTSD to extreme pain to any of those things. So we want to do everything we can to help those guys out, and had a great time on their podcast. And they have a Facebook group also, so I'll post that information as well, and try to lend.
What's the name of their podcast and channel or the stuff that you're on? Let's give them a shout out.
Let me look for it.
As they're kind enough to have you over there, let's make sure we mention them on our show.
Yeah. So we're broadcasting on the dysfunctionalveteransradio.net, and let's see, the name of their let's see. That's the one they sent me. They sent me an acronym. So, sorry, go ahead.
Well, he's looking for that. If you guys are looking for some other podcasts, there's the Grow From Your Heart podcast, which I think is based out of Colorado. There's the Dude Grows Show podcast, which is also based out of Colorado. And there's trying to think of the other. There's one other podcast, the Growers podcast. So that's escaping me at the moment. But if you guys are looking for other ones, well, he's looking that up there. Or even a website people can look up more information on finding them or anything. Or?
Well, you can look up the dysfunctionalveteransradio.net.
Okay.
That one is definitely, that's where they get broadcast on. But they have a group that is an acronym, but I don't know what the definition of the acronym is. So
sure.
That's what I'm looking for. Hang on.
No worries. But yeah, we're going to try and do some more collaborative stuff here in the future and bring some more cooler guests on, and we'll have some more interesting footage on and stuff like that in the future. So. All right. Well, I guess we'll make sure we have all that queued up for when he's.
I'll have to ask him.
On the show. We'll ask him. We'll get that information for next episode. Alrighty. Unless you got anything else, I think we'll wrap it up.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks everybody for watching. See you guys next time.
Yep. Thanks everybody for listening and watching. Check us out again soon. Make sure you like, favorite, subscribe, comment. Leave us questions for next episode. Thanks again. Take care.
Peace.